job interview is a high-stakes information-gathering exercise. Both parties are trying to make the same kind of decision. Is this the right match? The candidate is assessing the role and organization. The manager is assessing whether this candidate has the capability, the motivation, and the character to succeed in the role. Done well, an interview generates the specific behavioral and predictive data needed to make a confident hiring decision. Done poorly, it generates an impression, a gut feeling about a person that is shaped by cognitive biases that research consistently shows are unreliable predictors of job performance. The difference between an effective interview and an ineffective one is not charisma, it is structure. This video is the manager's guide to conducting interviews that produce the right information to make the right hire. The first milestone is interview preparation, the step that most hiring managers abbreviate. Before the interview begins, 3 preparation activities determine the quality of what follows. First, job clarity, a precise articulation of the 2 or 3 most important outcomes this person must achieve in the first 12 months, and the specific capabilities, not just the qualifications, required to achieve them. Most job descriptions list activities. What hiring managers need to know is outcomes. The interview should be built around assessing capability for those outcomes. Second, behavioral question design. Behavior-based interviewing, developed from the foundational research of industrial psychologists, rests on one well-validated premise. Past behavior in similar circumstances is the best available predictor of future behavior. Questions should be designed to elicit specific, real examples. Tell me about a time when, or describe a situation in which you. Questions about what candidates would do in hypothetical scenarios produce aspirational answers. Questions about what they actually did produce evidence. Third, a structured evaluation rubric. Define in advance what an excellent, adequate, and concerning answer to each key question looks like. This rubric prevents the post-interview scoring distortion that occurs when interviewers remember primarily their overall impression of the candidate rather than the specific quality of their responses. The second milestone is the interview itself, the structured conversation that gathers, explores, and evaluates behavioral evidence. Effective interview facilitation has 4 elements. First, a warm but professional opening that establishes the format and sets the candidate at ease enough to speak authentically. Stressed candidates give defensive answers that are less informative than relaxed ones. Second, behavioral questioning executed with follow-up discipline. The most common interviewing failure is accepting a vague answer without probing it. A candidate who says, "I managed a complex project under tight timelines," has provided an introduction, not an answer. The follow-up questions: what specifically was the most difficult obstacle? What was your approach? What was the outcome? Produce the evidence. The STAR structure, situation, task, action, result, is the framework for both asking and evaluating behavioral responses. Third, silence as a tool. Interviewers who rush to fill every pause miss the content that emerges after a candidate pauses to think. Comfortable silence is a signal to the candidate that depth is expected. Fourth, the candidate's questions. What a candidate asks reveals as much as what they answer. A candidate who has thought carefully about the role, the team, and the challenges ahead asks different questions than one who has not. The third milestone is decision-making discipline, the post-interview process that converts impressions into evidence-based decisions. 3 practices protect hiring decisions from bias. First, individual scoring before group discussion. Interviewers should record their evaluations independently before comparing notes to prevent anchoring, the tendency for early stated opinions in a group to disproportionately shape others. Second, evidence review rather than impression review. The post-interview debrief should focus on what specific evidence did the candidate provide about their capability for the key outcomes, rather than what did you think of them. Third, structured comparison. When evaluating multiple candidates, assess each against the same criteria at the same threshold, rather than comparing candidates against each other. The question is not who was best, but who meets the standard. Here is the trap: unconscious affinity bias. The tendency to evaluate candidates more favorably when they are perceived as similar to the interviewer is one of the most consistently documented and most consistently underestimated biases in hiring. Structured interviewing with defined rubrics is the most effective mitigation strategy available. Organizations that implement structured interview processes with standardized questions, defined scoring criteria, and multiple interviewers hire more effectively and more equitably than those that rely on unstructured conversation and gut feeling. Your go-to. For the next role you interview for, write down the 3 behavioral questions you will ask every candidate and write down what an excellent answer to each one looks like. Use that rubric to score every interview before comparing candidates. Measure whether this produces a better hire than your previous process. Effective hiring is only the beginning of talent management. The retention video in this series addresses how to keep the people you hire at their best. That is your next step. Panel interviews, where a candidate is assessed simultaneously by multiple interviewers, require specific preparation that differs from one-on-one interview facilitation. The advantage of panel interviews is that they generate multiple independent assessments, which reduces the impact of individual interviewer bias and increases the reliability of the overall assessment. The disadvantage is that poorly managed panels can create a confusing, intimidating, or incoherent candidate experience and can generate conflicting assessments that are harder to reconcile than the assessments from a structured series of individual interviews. Effective panel interview management requires specific role allocation. Each panel member should have a defined domain of assessment: technical competence, team fit, leadership capability, rather than asking questions opportunistically. The questions from different panel members should be coordinated in advance to avoid repetition and to ensure full coverage of the assessment criteria. And the post-interview scoring should be individual before it is collective, for the same anchoring bias reasons that apply to individual interviewing. The candidate experience across the interview process, from the initial contact through the offer stage, is also a significant organizational consideration. Research from talent acquisition professionals and from candidate surveys consistently finds that the quality of the interview experience materially affects a candidate's perception of the organization and their likelihood of accepting an offer if made. Slow response times, disorganized interview processes, poor communication about next steps, and interviewers who have not reviewed the candidate's materials before the interview all signal organizational dysfunction to candidates who are simultaneously evaluating multiple opportunities. The best candidates have choices. The organizations that treat the interview process as a candidate experience, not just an assessment exercise, consistently attract a higher quality of accepted offers. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, hit like and subscribe to our channel for more practical insights. And if you're ready to go further, check out the next video on your screen.